Is there a...
Oh, yeah.
Is there a? Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Try that.
Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, so we're going to talk about hickories, and we're going to talk about how we've kind of jumped through. Is this the mic?
No.
Is this the mic?
Thanks. Closer.
Okay.
Stand closer, you don't have to bend over. Just,
I'll do this. Okay. So, I focus on hybrid hickories, and I was inspired a couple of, so I had been working with shagbarks because I just love the flavor. A couple of years ago, Jesse was calling me up, and he was like, yeah, we're pressing oil, you should really talk about, or like get into cordiformis, yellow bud hickory. And I was like, I'm just not, it's not my thing. And then I was at Weschke's farm looking for the best hickory. Can you scroll down? You're going to have to move the slides for me. No way. Nothing. Can you, next slide?
okay, you have to teach the next person that comes up how to advance.
Yeah, not this, but it's on the side.
It's on the side.
Let's try this, plus or minus. See if that'll work.
That's the volume.
Can you just, can I just say next? Okay. So yeah, I was at Weschke's farm. Jesse was like, yeah, you should be interested in oil. And then I was like, I found this gateway variety, which appears to be a Weschke seedling, and it was super productive. It's a seedling of Weschke, 48% kernel, and I'm like, maybe this is a thin enough shell to press. And I was like, I was not stoked about cordiformis, but then once I saw this, I was like, oh, what can be pressed for oil for hickories? And the wild shagbarks, they have such a thick shell that you can't like put them through an oil press. But then Sam Thayer told me about Skyview, which is a selection of his that's 45% kernel. And he was like, yeah, you can press it for oil. The oil's fine. And shagbark even, you can press it for oil. You just got to pull out some of the shell. So it's just a matter of getting a high enough kernel to shell content ratio. So this gateway opened up the gateway drug into dual purpose hickories. And then next slide. And then I was like, okay, so why could this be useful to have a dual purpose hickory? Well, first of all, maybe you want to crack the nut. Second of all, you might want to milk your nut. Third of all, you might want to press your nut. And then, what if you're pressing the nut? What do you do with the press cake? Maybe we can, I haven't tried this yet, but I'm going to this fall. Maybe we could milk the press cake, because all the flavor of the hickory goes into the press cake, and the oil is just a really, really mild, nutty, delicious, smooth oil. So it's not like olive oil where it has that bite at the end. It's just really smooth. So the aroma of the press cake, even of bitter nut, is just so good. Squirrels will be running around your oil pressing facility. Sam Thayer said they actually make circles, and they'll dump out the press cake, and they'll go all over to it and get crazy. And then, so there's a lot of potential options, and then I'm looking into automated cracking for these dual-purpose hickories, or multi-purpose hickories as well. And then additionally, this is kind of an added benefit, but bitter nuts it's difficult to husk bitter nuts, and we're figuring that out. There's different challenges with yellow buds, and the hybrids, a lot of them will just hit the ground, the husk falls off, and you pick up the nut. So there's not that additional step for processing, which is interesting. And you might be able to have you can have sediment in your oil and not have astringency. So all interesting potentials for this hybrid hickory. Next slide. And then an additional benefit is right now we have oil pressing pretty well figured out overall. It's like we have a process, it makes sense. We don't have the automated cracking figured out yet. I'm working on it. It'll be done soon. We'll have a prototype soon. Brandon Rutter's working on a cracker head for me for the prototype, and then it's still a prototype. I'll need more funding, and we'll have to figure out how to get money for that to make a real commercial grade automated cracker. But we know how to orient them. We know how to put in one nut at a time, and we have nuts that crack out really well. So let's start putting in orchards for oil, and then we can make those orchards work, make really productive oil orchards, and then transition to potentially like a pecan kernel alternative. So that's why we're talking about nuts next slide, or why we're interested in these multi-purpose. But there's still a lot of problems, and there's this next slide. Next slide. Right. So I guess one of the problems is automated cracking, and I kind of want to do a throw out to Bill Whipple. Is he around? Bill Whipple? He's at the Asheville Nuttery. I was at the NNGA last year, and I was like, okay, well, I just got to figure out how to automated crack these nuts. And he plays around with machinery all the time, and I just didn't know where to start. And he was like, just start playing around with shit with your hands, and like just try to move it without your hands. So like use sticks and stuff. So eventually I figured out. I think you can scroll down a little bit on this slide. So I lined up some nuts of kind of different shapes, and I just slid them on a piece of board, and I figured out that if you just have nuts, hickory nuts oftentimes, most hickory nuts, when you drop them, they land on their face. So that's one axis of orientation. And then I figured out if you take another piece of wood and just slide it along these hickory nuts, they all orient the same direction, and they orient to the long dimension against that piece of wood. So then, it keeps going, next slide, keeps going, and then you figure out, okay, you can index it, and then you can slide it along a piece of wood with some, pistons and cylinders, next slide. And then eventually I figured out, okay, we can use some physics, we can have a conveyor belt and some other belts, like pulleys running along, and do some physics math, and you can make a continuous process out of that. Next slide. And then we don't know, like, this is how we're able to do it now. I can orient a nut with machinery in a continuous process, but I'm telling you guys this not because I'm like trying to be like, this is the way to do it. I'm saying this is a way to do it, and it's not going to be the final way to do it. We need someone to keep thinking of ideas, keep going. And another hurdle for hickories is propagation. Trees are like $80, and that's the cost because they're just hard to propagate. You got to grow out a seedling for 2 years and then graft it and then grow it out another year. Mark Hammond, I was talking with Mark Hammond, and he was like, yeah, there's a lot of potential in epicotyle grafting for hickories. So I didn't have hickory seed the year he told me, but I had black walnuts that the squirrels had planted in my garden, and I started seeing them in the garden, and I was like, oh, epicotyle graft those. So I dug them up, and I got like 2 successes on black walnut the first year. It only put on 3 inches of growth and died in the winter. I did it again the next year, and then I got 9 inches of growth out of one. I got 50% take, and the squirrels dug up like 90% of them. So I protected them more this year, but I'm getting a foot of growth off an epicotyle graft for black walnut first year, and it's healed first winter. That's how we reduce cost. And you can keep staying on this slide. So then I'm like, okay, let's do the same thing for hickory. I grafted 300 last year. Turns out if you mix oil with your wax, the oil seeps into the graft union and kills all your grafts. So I lost all 300 last year, but I lost them for black walnut too. And I was like, well, it worked the year before, so why didn't it work this year? And then I was like, it's got to be the oil. So I changed the mixture, and you started using cheese wax and beeswax 50-50 mix. And in the best category, I got over 50% success on epicotyle grafting hickories. They put on a similar amount of growth as a seedling. And 3 more minutes?
1 more minute.
One more, okay. Yeah, so this is what I learned this year. It's not the final solution, but I'll do another 300 next year and hone it in. Next slide. So we have, a track on how to make good propagation happen. This is just saying, if you want to learn the depth of a crop, you gotta know what a good staple crop is, and corn is a good staple crop, so you should grow corn. Next, well, and I think we're done. So, but we got more.